when I went into Gaza, it dispelled the myth that everyone there is living in extremely crowded and extreme poverty. That's not true. I was a F-16 fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force for 8 years. Being in the air in a war is very different from being on the ground. I've done both, and I can testify that it's a whole other world. When I was in the Israeli Air Force, it was during the Syrian civil war, and we were standing up to, evil like ISIS.
This is a Visegrad 24 series about the Israel-Hamas War.
So we're here today with Naftali Hazony, who comes from a great, large Israeli family of public intellectuals, of Israeli patriots, fighters. Many family members are currently serving in the current conflict. We're going to have a conversation about his views on everything going on the ground, and getting to know him. I'm sure he won't hold back. So great to be with you, Naftali. And
it's a pleasure to be here.
And Thank you. Start out with just a little bit of your background. Some people might be familiar with your uncle Yoram because he's such an international thought leader on nationalism and sovereignty and patriotic movements politically around the world. But you're here. You've obviously served. Tell us a little bit about your engagement in Israeli society as a citizen.
I grew up in Jerusalem most of my life, and I spent the last 15 years of my life, most of them in the military. I was a F-16 fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force for 8 years, and I then left. I started a startup company in high tech, and in this past war, I volunteered for infantry, a special forces infantry unit called 551. I'm from a big family indeed. We're close to 150 cousins here in Israel. I've got 9 siblings, 5 of which are in the front line. I've got a brother in the north in a tank. I've got a younger sister, Achinoam, who's a special forces combat fighter in the K9 unit, meaning she trains with dogs. And in this war, she's fighting with dogs and rescuing people.
Well, so you were obviously, as you say, deeply involved, many, many years active. And that was before this war, but there's always been tensions. There's always been conflicts. Every few years, there's something that goes kinetic here, whether it's from the north or whether it's from Gaza or whether it's from the east. What are 15 years? You were a pilot. What that is so declassified that you can tell us about some of the missions you did, some of the battles that you were in?
Sure. So, being in the air in a war is very different from being on the ground. I've done both, and I can testify that it's a whole other world. When I was in the Israeli Air Force, it was during the Syrian civil war, and we were standing up to, evil like ISIS, and in Israel, periodically we were standing up to evil like Hamas. In Lebanon, we would do missions, and what was it like? Well, it's incredibly challenging to be a fighter pilot. It takes many years to train for it. You meet fantastic people, and you see crazy things, and ultimately, I'd say it was an honor. And it was an enriching experience, meaning I learned a lot about the world. I grew as a person. I stood up in scary situations. I've been shot. People shot missiles at me, in Syria, and I think I contributed tremendously, as much as I could, to the security of the state of Israel. And I was actually involved in this program that was helping infantry get fighter jets to help them during war. And it was called Project Flash. And then during this war, I got to see the project that I started back in the Air Force on the ground as an infantry soldier, as a special forces soldier. When I called in the fighter jets to help us in Gaza, I got to see the program that I created. So it was a lot of closure there. How's it been? Well, it's really just been an honor for me. I think people don't say that enough, but fighting for your country is a tremendous privilege. Being able to protect your country is a tremendous privilege. Being able to protect your family is just, I just feel honored, and it gives me meaning in life.
And I will want to talk about some of the military, the philosophy behind the compulsory service in the IDF, but I do want to hit upon it. You have this unique experience being a fighter pilot, which is something that Hollywood has sort of sensationalized and commercialized, and obviously we saw Top Gun 2, which was years in the making. Top Gun being the gold standard of fighter pilot movies from 35, 40 years ago, that launched Tom Cruise's career. When you see the Hollywoodization of the fighter pilot life. How much does it look like that? How much does it look like Top Gun, the original from the 80s, or the more recent one? Or is that just totally, just a Hollywood commercialization, sensationalization?
I think the first one was a little whack. And I mean, it wasn't exactly realistic. It was a very fun movie, and it was fun to, grow up with that movie in my head and then actually live through it. The latest movie has been more realistic. There's a lot of jabbing and, it's and playing around and fun and funny talk. The missions in the last movie were quite realistic. You go in, you fly low, people shoot at you. You got to outsmart them, really. Yeah. You got to outsmart them. You got to, have better technology.
Dogfights are still a thing.
Not the way they show in the movie. They still are a thing. Meaning, if you start a dogfight today at 50 miles with long-range missiles, and then when you're out of your missiles, you can move into heat-seeking missiles, and then when you're out of those, you can actually commit a classic dogfight. But we did
converting a MiG, cockpit to cockpit.
No, that doesn't happen. But we did have altercations with Russian jets in Syria and with all sorts of different countries. Not all that I can name, but people keep saying, the future is just AI, and the future is just technology, and human beings are kind of leaving the scene. And I think the future is very technological, but especially in this latest war, we learned the value of steel and gunpowder and the classic weapons. And what we did see in Israel in the past 10 years, what I saw in my military service was that we very much still need good people protecting us, and we very much still need fighter jets and these things.
Good decision makers, people who are mature and sober and realistic.
Yeah, we need good decisions. We need good decision makers. We need to be smarter than our enemies. Our enemies are real. It's not just Israel's enemies, it's the enemies of the West. They're out there, they're smart. The Persians, Iran is the Persians, historically they were the Persian Empire. They know wars like the Jews know books, all right? They're very good at war. And it's very unfortunate that the current regime there is so anti-Western and so nefarious. But they're good at what they do, meaning they're good at this war. And if we don't stand up and sharpen up and get our act together, and I'm talking about Israel, but also other countries in the West, then they're going to win. We can beat them, but we got to do this. We got to get our act together and defeat them.
The idea of compulsory, because your whole family, so many members of your family have served. This compulsory military service that teenagers, they go into their young adulthood and they do this service. How do you think that creates a special society, a different zeitgeist among the young who are going to enter careers after this service, how it matures them, how it creates cohesion in society?
I'll flip the question around. I mean, military service is compulsory here, but I don't know a single person that fought in Gaza that didn't want to be there. If you don't want to go into the war, if you don't want to fight, you can go. And in fact, myself, I served there I was in Gaza for 2.5 months fighting in Bet Hanun and Jabalia and Tatra. And I just got married in March, so I'm newlyweds. Thank you to Leora. And it was very difficult to be away from home like that. And because Israel is so understanding and understands the value of the home front, I asked to leave 2 weeks early in one of the missions, and then it's totally fine. You go, you take care of what you need, take it home. Some people have businesses, some people have families. Someone's kid went to the hospital, he was sick. Israelis go and protect their country voluntarily. And that's also true about the so-called compulsory service. It's compulsory in the sense that you legally need to do it. If you don't want to do it, you can find a way out.
Some sort of service. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get drafted and get thrown into,
Exactly. But what it does do, we teach our kids that you have a responsibility towards your country, you have a responsibility towards your family, and you have a responsibility towards a random stranger in the street. Your responsibility towards them can play out in protecting them like we do in the war, but it can also play out if they need some help, someone is stuck in the middle of the night, it's raining outside, you can help them. It ingrains it in the culture to think about your surroundings and to take care of other people, and I think that's a value that often is lacking today, because people grow up, we think about our rights, and our rights are super important. I mean, I'm happy to be in a free country where I can speak my mind and vote, but nothing is going to work unless we also give our part. So that's my thought about it.
Well, it's you hit upon something previously when you said that there's a fight for the West, for civilization, for humanity, and that's another responsibility that Israel has assumed by virtue of the historical nature of this place. It is the cradle of the Judeo-Christian ethos that has delivered so much progress to the world. Do you guys discuss that as young people, but thoughtful young people? Do you guys talk about the role you guys are playing in the world at large?
Well, if I was, if I was a slick politician, I would pull out, I've got this armband. It's not really an armband, it's a headband at home. It's this piece of cloth that, if you look at the videos of October 7th, you could see most of the terrorists wear it. It's this green, dark green piece of cloth. They tie it around their head.
And it's got Arabic written on it.
What does it say? It says on their forehead when they're fighting, it says, Allahu Akbar.
God is great.
God is great.
Yeah.
So, well, what do they mean by that? I mean, we've got many peaceful religions in the world that say God is great. It shouldn't be such a terrible thing. But there aren't many religions or groups in the world that wear God is great on their head while they are committing the most sinful things you can imagine. So what it means is that in this extreme ideology, to commit those heinous crimes is to bring out the greatness of God for them in the world. That is their ethical, that is their moral statement. That's what they put on their forehead when they go out to fight. So if you think to yourself, if you're sitting at home and you think to yourself, this is Israel's war, it's just, it's a territorial dispute, it's a nationalistic dispute. Well, if it was that, then why are these people dressed like that? Why are these people saying those words when they commit those crimes? And the answer is that it isn't. Those words are the same words that ISIS uses in Syria. Those words are the same words that the terrorists who flew planes into the Twin Towers in 9/11, they yelled those same words. This extreme ideology is a global ideology. Israel happens to be located geographically in a place where it's rampant, meaning it's all over the place in the Middle East. There are many groups here. There are many groups here that are extreme and murderous with radical Islam, and we're fighting one of them. So when I say we're fighting your war, I mean it. I mean, obviously I'm trying to protect myself, but it could be in your city too. This is your war.
London, Paris, Berlin, Antwerp, Brussels, New York City.
So it's a very justified war against a very evil enemy, and that's all there is to it.
Well, I would even clarify further when you said, this is the only religion that does this. This is not prevalent in Judaism and Christianity, any of its formats, in Shintoism or Hinduism or Buddhism or Confucianism or Zoroastrianism or Baha'i. It is the only theology that is a proponent of forced coercion, submission, and death by the blade if those other criteria are not met.
There has to be a future. There has to be a future where we can live in peace in the Middle East with Muslims, and we do. Yeah. We have peace in the Middle East with Muslims. So that means that it's possible to achieve a better future. And I can say, and I strongly believe that we need to fight these radicals. We have to fight these radicals. It's a matter of life and death for everything that you believe in. But that doesn't mean that we can't also appreciate the good things that come from these societies and the good things that come from these civilizations. It doesn't mean we can't dream for a better future with them. We don't need to eradicate. And we're not in a war, I think, against necessarily Islam, but we can fight this evil at the same time as building a better future with Islam.
How do we deal with then, and I agree with what you say, there's certainly, much more secular Islamic societies like in Southeast Asia, but obviously even there are fringes. In Pakistan and the Kashmir region, the Indians are so aligned with Israel because they have a similar experience with those who would wear the same green headband and yell Allahu Akbar as they bomb, the local regions in Kashmir to assert themselves. But here in Gaza and the West Bank, we see the polling. We see, Gaza gave Hamas a mandate. And most Gazans, it still seems, would renew that mandate over and over. And you see, Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMORY, and talking to the mothers and say, our proudest goal is to have to deliver martyr after martyr because we worship death. And it's so embedded in some of these Islamic society segments, like Gaza, like West Bank, where they're throwing candy in celebration. These are the people who are supposed to be sharing in a two-state solution. So how do we assert the values of life and loving your brother and trying to be in some level of cohesion or harmony?
I'm just a simple soldier. I think those questions go far over my head.
You've been on the ground.
I've been on the ground. In October, my cousin's still in captive. My cousin's girlfriend, Kamel Gat, is still in captivity in Gaza. We thought she was murdered on October 7th. Carmel Gat. She's one of the last women who are still in Gaza.
How old is she?
She's in her 40s, early 40s. Where
was she captured from?
From Be'eri. People who were with her in the captivity said she was giving them yoga and meditation classes inside Gaza.
A heroic spirit, no doubt.
Yes. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis are still unable to return to their homes in the northern front and in
Under envelope.
and and I don't blame them, because this is boiled over to a point where we either take care of this or we can't live here. It's an existential issue for Israel. And what I mean by take care of this is that we can't have these radical groups on our border murdering us, shooting rockets at us, kidnapping us, conducting invasions whenever they want. The era of Israelis just playing defense and trying to be nice and hoping that's going to be a good strategy, I think is over. Israel's willing to fight this out for as long as we need to, because it's our home and we've got nowhere else to go.
So the politics of it, both domestically and then internationally, with bodies like the UN. You were in the military for not just, right now, but for many, many years. And the Israeli military, like all militaries, especially when it's such a big segment of society, as it needs to be here, or it needs to be in the US with the NATO commitments and such. The politics of it has been very controversial for many years internally. A lot of debate. You've got the gallants, and then you've got some of the guys who are a little more dovish on the military policies. Where do you stand on it, and where do you think it's going?
I think everything has changed in Israel. It used to be, Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2006, was it? 2005? 2005.
Yeah. Ariel Sharon.
Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005. Much of the Israeli public didn't want to be there, precisely because there was so much terrorism and there was so much murder on the side of the Palestinian terror groups. And for a long time, we were kind of hoping that, well, maybe if we just leave and we say, you stay there on that side of the wall, we'll build a wall. You'll stay there on that side of the wall. They have a border with Egypt. They have a beachfront. They can.
But the Egyptians, do they allow free?
No, they didn't. And that's part of what developed. We said, we let you have your own space. We'll have our own space, and that could be fair, and that'll work out. And it hasn't. They essentially had a state there until October 7th. They had a health ministry. They had a flag. They had government. They had elections in 2006 where Hamas was voted in by a majority. So we essentially built the Palestinian state in Gaza, and we were hoping that the idea was that when we pull out and we give them independence.
And infrastructure, greenhouses and agricultural sector.
Exactly. We'll support them, meaning, and we went as far as they use the
Water,
Israeli electricity to thrive. And that was the hope. And what actually happened is that the more money they got and the more support they got and the more independence they got, the stronger and better they got at terrorism, and the more support terrorists have there. And the more rockets they shot at us and the more tunnels they dug. Which means that
weapon storehouses they used in UN and Red Cross built hospitals and schools.
Exactly. So the more we tried to prop them up, they kept doing exactly what they were doing. It wasn't about poverty. It wasn't about lack of hope. They had everything that they needed that we were hoping would give them this opportunity for peace. And instead, they launched this tremendously vicious war against us. So Israelis now understand, because of that there is no, just you be there, we'll be here. That's not a tenable solution unless we just want to be dead. Yes. So if we're going to be alive, if we're going to live in Israel, we have to defeat them. We have to defeat these radical terror groups, and that means going into Gaza. And that's changed. That's changing the mentality of Israel. Israel has no patience now for these utopian ideas. We just want to be safe.
It even seems like those who would be, of the left persuasion, who would sing Kumbaya, hug a terrorist day, they've been mugged by reality. They've sobered up on the utopianist ideology that has failed so miserably and led to so much further and unnecessary deaths.
Yes.
Where do you see the country going politically? You are a political person. Everyone in your family, I know some of your family members are very political. Obviously, some are more than others. But do you feel that the incumbents were asleep at the wheel? Do you think there's blame to go there? Or you think this is something that when there was a will, there was a way with the terrorism that transpired and the mass heinous attack that occurred October 7th?
I grew up viewing what happens in my family, in my community, in my country, first and foremost, as my responsibility. And I know it's a little bit crazy to say that, that October 7th was my fault. Of course, it wasn't my fault. It was the fault of the terrorists in Gaza, of the Hamas, and the popular support they had.
The Iranians that funded them.
And Iran, and we found a lot of Chinese weapons.
Yeah, of course. Well, Iran and China are working together along with Russia for the last 15 years.
Were they asleep at the wheel? We were all asleep at the wheel. we were all asleep at the wheel. We believed the lie that a terrorist is, 1 in 1,000. He's a radical. He's a one-off. He's a lone wolf. So if a terrorist is 1 in 1,000 and a lone wolf, then the worst that can happen coming out of Gaza from terrorists is a terrorist attack with 1 or 2 terrorists across the border. And that's what we had in our head, and that's a lie. It's extremely popular there. A lot of people are terrorists. It's not 1 in 1,000. And that means that on October 7th, thousands and thousands and thousands of people crossed the border, many without guns, and committed the atrocities that they did. Many took kitchen knives and stabbed children and women, because the ideology is so popular that we're really fighting a popular movement, and we're really fighting an army. We're fighting the army of the pseudo-South Palestinian state that existed in Gaza. They had all these different things, and they built an army against us, and they invaded us. It wasn't a terrorist attack, it was an invasion.
It seems that, especially in Gaza, I think more to a greater degree than, say, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, where there are attacks, there are people going around the old town with cleavers and doing a random stab. I was there last week, and there was one, or what we saw at Renan 3 days ago. But in Gaza, even the mothers are saying we're all part of this revolutionary movement. So is there an answer to even still having, a formalized two-state, but going back to what the status quo was with a wall and tighter security? Or does Israel have to take back over Gaza and undo what Sharon did in 2005?
Well, first off, I don't know where the notion is that women can't fight comes from when it comes to Gaza. When I was in Jabalia, we found this mother. She was in her 40s, and her kids, who were shooting mortars at us. They had maps from their apartment. They had mortars in their backyard. They had you need a map with ranges, and you need to calculate it. Yeah. Talented woman, yeah. But she's trying to kill us. So it's not just middle-aged men that are fighting. It's a lot of different people that are fighting, and it's very difficult to figure out whether the person in front of you just happens to be there out of circumstance, or whether he or she is a terrorist. Yeah. And is it going to go back to the way it was? I think nothing in the Middle East is going back to the way it was. Even though I do believe that things tend to change slowly. Yeah. I think that Israel understands that we need to start changing the way we act, and we need to start changing the geopolitics of the near Middle East in order for us to survive here. And I think a lot of people in the West are understanding that too, given what's going on in Yemen and in Iran, and all over the world.
So what do we do with these people? What do we do with people who are so in hoc that they've even thrown out this holy vow to take care of their fellow men, and they're willing to take part in terrorist hostage and holding people against their will, kidnapping babies and 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds? What's the answer? What does Gaza look like in 24 months from now? Where are the Gazans going to be?
I don't want to step into the shoes of Israel's politicians. I think that our political class is doing a good job. They're doing the best that they can to resolve this. And I think it's also probably not in our best interest to answer that question now. I will say that given the popularity of Hamas in Gaza, and given what Hamas stands for, it's not shocking that a doctor is taking part in a hostage situation, because it's an ideology. It's not a matter of lack of education. It's not a matter of lack of funds. It's an ideology. It's what these people believe in at their core. That first they should kill all the Jews, and next probably take on the West, or at the same time. So
it says first they come for the Saturday people, then they come for the Sunday people.
Exactly. So
adopted from him.
What does Gaza look like? Well, it's not going to be Hamas controlled, because Israel is winning. I know that the discourse is all about how maybe painful it is, what's going on in Gaza. But it's painful because Israel is winning. We're taking over large pieces of territory there. We're going in and out at our whim. We're destroying huge amounts of tunnel infrastructure. We've killed thousands and thousands and thousands of, or tens of thousands of Hamas members.
It's not just all babies? Not 24,000, infants to 4-year-olds, as some of the media say. And
well, I think nobody knows how many people are dying in Gaza, and I think if someone well-intentioned just happens to be in a crossfire and gets hit, or if somebody, if a child gets hit, then I think that's always a tragedy. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that Israel can't defend itself, and it doesn't mean that we can't wage war in Gaza. And the devastation in Gaza right now that's going on is there to remind people and to warn people about what will happen to them if they try to kill Jews in Israel. That's what it's there for. Make no mistake, we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going. We're going to, do our best not to harm civilians, but we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going until the Hamas is destroyed. And if you want to guess where it's going, that's the direction. Israelis are tired of getting killed. We're tired of having our relatives killed. This isn't happening anymore. We're tired of playing defense. We're going on the offense now. We're going to be a stronger Israel. And if you don't want, to have your city destroyed and to have us evacuate all the civilians so we can fight you, then stop attacking us. You have two choices. You either live in peace with Israel in the Middle East, or you don't live at all. That's the new reality of the Middle East. And I think many Arab countries are going to make peace with Israel for that exact reason, and it's already happening. But if you choose to fight Israel, then myself and many other people who could otherwise be, in finance or in high tech or doing all these other, building technology for the world, we're going to spend our time making sure that these terrorist organizations are wiped off the face of the earth, just like we wiped ISIS out of our neighborhood. It's going to be exactly the same thing.
You said that Israel is going to wipe out Hamas, which is, I don't think any of the willing viewers of Visegrad or the people in our circles politically, ideologically have any issue with that. The challenge of separating the wheat from the chaff, who is Hamas, when we also just spent the last 15 minutes talking about the doctors and the mothers, and is everybody in Gaza Hamas? Are there people you think, you've been on the ground there, who want to be rid of this Hamas overlordship and this forced war and terrorism that has defined their segment of society, their society? Are there those people you think that in good faith want to live side by side or just live their life wherever it's going to be without being motivated by from the river to the sea?
We need to empower the voices in Gaza that don't call for the destruction of the West, meaning the ones that call for peace and prosperity. And there are voices like that there. Today, if you say that in Gaza, you're lynched. We need to empower them. How do I know that it's possible? Because in the 40s and the 50s in Israel, the Palestinians, the Arabs, were living in Jaffa and in Haifa. And me and you right now are sitting in a hotel in Tel Aviv, right next to Jaffa. And we can go over there and we can, eat hummus or go to a bar together with Arabs there. These are the same Arabs that's the same ethnicity of the people who live in Gaza. How is that possible? It's possible because when you don't empower a radical terrorist regime to take over the education there, and when you don't make the conflict last by empowering those groups, and instead you empower Western values and you empower the good in the world, and you do business with the people who want to do business with Jews and aren't anti-Semitic, and then it's possible to have peace and it's possible to have prosperity. But when you start going down this slippery slope of, maybe they're just murderous terrorists because they had a hard life. That's kind of what the movies are telling us now. The reason he's a terrorist is because he had a hard life. Well, I'll tell you, most of the houses we saw in Gaza, the terrorist houses, were very nice houses. I would love to live in a house like that. We were in a house with Roman pillars made out of marble. These people are wealthy and they're educated, just like Osama bin Laden was educated and John the jihadist was educated. Their problem is their ideology, and we shouldn't be helping them in any way. We shouldn't be supporting them in any way. We need to fight them. We need to defeat them. And then we need to put in place actually pro-Western groups, and we need to empower them.
So not UN, not UNRWA, not the perversion of the Red Cross as it exists right now on the ground.
The center of terror, the center for terror in Gaza is UNRWA. That's where the most powerful Hamas tunnels and bases and weapons are. I went to an UNRWA school. We were in Bet Hanun. That's a community in northern Gaza, a town. And it's got an UNRWA school. And we were doing our best to, fight around the school because it's a school and we love life and we think attacking the school is terrible. And they did their best to attack us from the school, but it doesn't stop there. The tunnels, the food in there is UNRWA food, meaning the food inside Hamas, they have sacks of UNRWA wheat and flour, exactly. And you go into the UNRWA school and all you see in these children's books are anti-Semitic tropes. My friend Alex, we found this suicide vest for a suicide bomber for a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. It was this small. That's what UNRWA is doing. So, I'm all for the community of nations, but we also have to stop lying to ourselves about what these organizations are doing. They're not doing it by accident. They very well know that the money from UNRWA is going into tunnels and into terror and into incitement.
There's been a lot of financing going in, whether it's Iran or whether it's U.S. taxpayers. So there's a lot of blood on the hands of those Western progressive elites who claim to, want this community of nations, want values-based order, and instead they're helping enable this. It's interesting what you say about Gaza having these sort of wealthy style domiciles. It's certainly not, that's not out there in the world. It is out there that in Ramallah, that in the West Bank, I've driven through these areas, and you're shocked at how opulent some of these homes are. It looks like Holmby Hills outside LA. But it is interesting you say that about Gaza. That's actually fair.
It's also not true that it's one of the most dense places. I mean, Tel Aviv is much more dense. If you just look it up, Google it, the top dense cities in the world. Gaza isn't in the top. Tel Aviv is. I live in a tiny apartment here. It's like it's about as bad as the apartments I had in New York, which is also a very dense place. And when I went into Gaza, it dispelled the myth that everyone there is living in extremely crowded and extreme poverty. That's not true. The electricity there is provided by Israel. We pay for it. The Israelis pay for it. Would you like free electricity? That sounds great. I pay for my own electric bills. Yeah. The water there is provided by Israel. The food, you can get free food from UNRWA. The schools and the hospitals are built. They have 35 hospitals for 2 million people. That's a lot. So, and when you go into the actual houses, in general, families there, they live in something called chamula. It's a family, and every daughter or son that gets married, they build another floor. So a family has a building. So that's very, very common in Gaza, even in the poor areas. And when I went there, it was more spacious. It was more spacious than the apartment I live here, and cost of living is a thing in Israel. So it was a little frustrating to see that, I'm living here and I'm struggling. Maybe, sometimes people are struggling to make ends meet. And you go into Gaza and you see that, well, actually, it's not the poverty that's leading them to do that. They just hate us. Yeah. They just have tons of hate for us, and that's what's making them do these things. Well, but now you should hardball me.
Well, you did hit upon the children's books, the really embedding the ideology from the youthful, the lowest level of education. It's really sad and frightening. But you also made a great dichotomy with, the Arabs in Jaffa. I mean, some of us on this team have gone to smoke shisha on Frischman in an Arab establishment, and we love these guys. They don't drink. Some of us do. What's the expression? Live and let live. And we're having great conversations with them. We're hoping to get them on for an interview. So the same group of Arab guys who are all, working class guys, but one of them owns a shisha shop, and they're there every night watching soccer, football, and they're wonderful people. It's just how many generations will it take to propagandize, uncoerce the mentality that's been on the ground in Gaza and, secondarily in places like Ramallah and Jenin and Nablus and all over the West Bank. I mean, what do you say? How long do you think this can take? Do you think it's possible?
It's definitely possible. I don't buy it's mostly a Western kind of thing to say, well, the West can't actually win against terror. It's impossible, It's not true. Well, it's the same people who say that. The same people are saying to the West that it can't win. These are the same people that tell men that they can't be strong. They're the same people that, they tell women they can't be strong if they're white. They're the same people who believe that if you're strong, you're evil. It's this crazy idea. So when these people, they
colonialist mindset, the intersectional.
Exactly. These people, they say, all right, if winning means that you're strong, well, then we don't want to be strong, do we, right?
Oppressor. If you're
an oppressor, we don't want to be oppressor. Well, actually, it's possible to win. It's possible to win. I know that first off because we have won before against terror in the Middle East. We won against ISIS. I mean, ISIS was a big thing. It was all over the news. It was everywhere. Where are they? Yeah. So the West fought ISIS, and we won, all right? Yeah. Put that on the record. 2003, 4, 5, Israel had a terrible intifada in the West Bank. So the same ideology that exists in Gaza exists in the West Bank. The same ideology, same level of support, maybe even higher in the West Bank. I saw this poll conducted by the Palestinian Research Center on November 22nd. The support in the West Bank was higher. So the same ideology exists there. But in 2003, our military went in, and we all but eradicated the suicide bombings and most of the terror that went on there. We now have isolated incidents. It's very possible to win. We just have to do it. You have to not be ashamed. You have to not let this torrent of hate on the news and on media scare you into well, maybe it's not worth to fight for yourself. It's justified to fight for yourself, and it's okay. It actually feels good to win, and we are winning, and we just gotta keep going. It's one thing to condemn the Hamas and to say the atrocities of October 7th, how terrible it is, the rapes and the murders and the savagery, the barbarians and the winter. That's one thing. It's a whole other thing to take the responsibility onto yourself and march into the darkness and look these monsters in the eye and fight them. That's a totally different thing. And that's what's demanded of our generation. We need to step up and fight this evil. And I'm not going to be apologetic about it. It's our calling.
Good. No, you certainly have a moral clarity, which I think a lot of our viewers, me personally, I respect and admire. You want hardball? I'll give you a 30-second speed round of political leadership and those who are sort of ideologically on the different polarities. Can you tell me what you think? Good, bad, ugly. Please. Benjamin Netanyahu.
I'd rather not answer that question.
Okay.
I think the reason I'm not answering it is because it's just a time for unity in Israel. Okay. And
well, Israel's going to have to chart a path on its leadership going forward. Ben Gvir, who is a controversial figure, who's very strong-minded, and a lot of people say, you know what, he's too strong-minded, he's too reactionary.
Israeli politician representing a legitimate voice in Israel. Both of them.
Yair Lapid.
Same.
Opposite sides of the same coin?
I don't think they're opposites. I think that there's actually a lot of consensus in Israel, and much of the argument is going around issues regarding the Supreme Court. But, for your viewers, I don't think that's what, I don't think they're as concerned about the Supreme Court in Israel as they are about, whether or not Israel is legitimate. And from Yair Lapid to Ben Gvir in Israel, they're all going to give you the same question. Of course we are. And of course we're going to be here. Of course we're going to live here. And we deserve a country just like anyone else does. So where are you going to live?
One last question that kind of you made me think about when you're shoulder to shoulder. I think about in American history, World War II did so much for the civil rights movement because black and white working class men were fighting shoulder to shoulder. And so they realized that, whether you're from, you're a black guy or a Puerto Rican guy from Manhattan or, Inwood, a Dominican neighborhood, or you're a Southern, third generation, fourth generation gentleman farmer from the South, when the bullets are flying by, everybody in a foxhole is, worshiping the same God, essentially. Coming here for me, it was a shock to see the rainbow coalition of people, especially in IDF uniforms, from Ethiopian, darker complexions to red-headed Ashkenazi, Russian Jews who, have peyot. Your experience in the military and seeing that, what was that like, working with so many people from so many different backgrounds, from Ashkenaz, Sephardi, North Africa, Europe, everywhere in the world, coming and doing Aliyah?
You mentioned a word there that I really liked that ties into what you said. I think it's also not mentioned enough on the internet, and that's the word God. So I'll tell you a personal story, and that ties into your question. When you go into a war, and this is an experience not shared by most people in their lives. When I went into Gaza, when you go into war, you're usually going at night, and there's no electricity, so it's pitch black, and you don't have your flashlight on, you don't have any light at all. It's dark. You're literally marching into darkness, and you have no idea who's waiting there for you and where they are. And you could step on a landmine, or you could trip on a tripwire and blow up, or and worse than maybe even dying is you get so badly injured that you live a life of pain afterwards. It's very scary, and I was scared going into Gaza. But that was a short fear. It was a short-lived fear. I wasn't scared many times in Gaza, and every time I was, I gave my soul to God. I closed my eyes and I spoke to God and I said, here's my soul. I'm giving it to you. It's yours. I don't have it anymore. Now, it'd be nice if you give it back and I get to go home and I get to see my wife and I get to be with my family and my siblings and, it'll be nice. But first and foremost, I'm giving it to you. It's yours. And every once in a while when I was afraid, I was just like, just do me a favor. Like, let me have my soul back when this is over. I think God is very much central to what's going on here. Most of the people I fought with were of North African descent, North African Jews, Moroccans and other Tunisian. And I had a Tespai, which you might want to interview. He's from Ethiopia. He's one of the best fighters on our unit. He's incredibly talented. We have people from all over the world here that came here to fight together, and it's not just the Jewish God. It's we're fighting for a Jewish home. We're fighting for the right of women to drive. We're fighting for monogamy. We're fighting for monogamy, for all these Jewish values. We're fighting for freedom. And most of all, the thing we say mostly when we pray for God as Jews, we say in every prayer, Hashem, we pray for peace. The last prayer in Shmoneh Esrei, we want peace. We're fighting for peace. So I want to thank God for letting me come back from the horrible war in Gaza, and for giving us a victory, and for giving me my life. And I want to thank God for the fact that we're going to win. I want to thank God for allowing us to win, and you'll see.
This was a great conversation, Naftali. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
The work you've done, incredible.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you very much.